On an ordinary walk through town, a battle-scarred soldier stumbled upon three boys offering to sell themselves for just $100. Haunted by the son he had lost, Jake Connolly knew in that moment his life would never be the same. What began as an act of compassion soon unraveled a story of hidden wounds, dark secrets, and the fight to prove that family isn't just blood, it's love, sacrifice, and choice. I was born in a town so small, folks didn't bother locking their doors. Cornfields on one side, silence on the other. And in between, a boy who never quite belonged. My father, he was a stern man. Believed pain was a better teacher than love. His hands were calloused, his voice sharper than any belt he ever used. And yet, I craved his approval like water in the desert. My mother? She was gentleness wrapped in silence. The kind of woman who hummed while she worked, like maybe she was trying to drown out the storms in the house. I remember the smell of her bread cooling on the windowsill. I remember sneaking pieces while my father's shadow loomed in the yard. And I remember the day she left. She didn't die, she just left. And when she did, the house lost its music. From that day, I learned two things. One, love don't always last. Two, when it leaves you hollow. That hollow followed me into every corner of my life. And when I became a man, I thought the army would fill it. I thought wearing a uniform would finally give me worth. But child, I was wrong. Pause, breath shakes. The hollow only grew deeper. At 18, I traded my name for a number. Traded my small-town silence for the sound of boots in unison. The army stripped me bare. It taught me to wake before the sun, to march until my legs screamed, to kill without hesitation and bury the guilt deep. And yet, for the first time I felt I belonged somewhere. Not because they loved me, but because every man beside me was just as broken, just as lost, just as desperate for a reason to keep breathing. War has a way of carving lines into your soul. I saw men laugh 1 minute and die the next. I saw villages burn. And I saw a boy barely 16 hold a rifle, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. That boy wasn't my enemy, but orders are orders. And when the dust cleared, I carried his face with me all the way home. Voice lowers, weight heavy. The war gave me medals, sure. But it also gave me ghosts, and the worst of them was the day I lost my son. Beat, long silence, then a whisper. But that is a story for the next chapter. You know, a soldier can survive bullets, bombs, even the silence of empty barracks. But nothing prepares a man for holding his child for the first time. Caleb, that was his name. The moment he wrapped his tiny fingers around my thumb, I swore the world could end right there, and I'd die a complete man. He had eyes like the summer sky, blue, but with flecks of green like the earth was afraid to let him go too far. And when he laughed, Lord, that sound could chase away every ghost war left behind. I wasn't the best father. The army taught me to fight, not to nurture, but I tried. Oh God, I tried. I'd come home from deployments, boots still caked, with dust from lands most Americans couldn't even pronounce. And there he'd be, running toward me, his arms wide, his smile so bright it could blind me. Pause, voice cracks, but the cruelest truth about life is this: you don't get to keep what you love. Caleb got sick. At first, just a cough. Then fevers that no doctor could explain. Hospitals, tests, whispers in white hallways. And one night, as machines hummed and monitors blinked like dying stars, my boy slipped from this world. Long silence, gravelly whisper. Do you know what it's like to bury a child? It ain't natural. It ain't right. It tears your soul wide open, and nothing ever stitches it back. From that day, I was no longer a soldier. I was a hollow man. Just a father without a son. And that hollow would come back to haunt me on that lonely roadside. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of evening where the sky bleeds orange and the air feels heavy with secrets. I had no destination. I was just walking, trying to outpace memories that always caught up anyway. And then I saw them, 3 boys. Thin as reeds, shoes worn down to nothing. A piece of cardboard in their hands. Scrawled words in crooked letters. For sale, $100 each. At first, I thought it was a cruel prank. Some neighbors' kids playing at being beggars. But when I drew closer, I saw the truth. Their eyes. Eyes that had seen too much hunger, too much loss. Eyes that were older than their years. The eldest. He stood tall, defiant, like a leader protecting the 2 behind him. The middle one kept his head low, like he'd already given up on mercy. And the smallest just stared at me. I asked them, "Who put you here?" The eldest said nothing. The middle one muttered, "Nobody wants us." And then the smallest whispered a word, a name, Caleb. Narrator pauses, lets the word hang in the air. I froze. My heart stopped cold. That was my son's name. The son I buried. The name I thought I'd never hear again outside of my own memories. The boy looked up at me. His lips trembled. And he said it again. Caleb. And child in that moment. I knew this wasn't chance. This was something greater. A hand I couldn't see, pulling me toward them. Gravelly whisper, almost trembling. I didn't know it then. But buying those boys for $300 was the beginning of everything. The beginning of the darkest fight of my life. I reached for my wallet with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It felt wrong, like I was buying cattle, not children. But what else could I do? Walk away? Pretend I hadn't seen? No, not after the name I'd heard. I pulled out 3 bills. Crisp hundreds, worn thin by years of being folded and forgotten. I pressed them into the eldest boy's hand. He stared at me, like he was waiting for a trick. "Come on," I said. "Let's get you boys something to eat." The middle one shuffled his feet. The youngest clung to my sleeve like he'd known me his whole life. And just like that, the deal was done. 3 children, bought by a lonely soldier. But child, don't mistake me. I didn't buy them like property. I bought them because I couldn't leave them there. Still, the weight of that moment pressed down on me. What kind of world puts a price tag on children? And what kind of man becomes part of that bargain? Pause, breathes heavy. I didn't know it then. But that $100 deal would put me face to face with devils darker than any battlefield. The walk back to my house was silent. 3 pairs of small footsteps followed me through the twilight. Every shadow stretched long across the pavement, as if the night itself was watching. When we reached my porch, the boys hesitated. The eldest pulled the younger 2 back. His eyes darted, calculating. "You can leave," I told him. "No one's keeping you here. But if you step inside, you'll eat. You'll rest, and you'll be safe." The smallest one tugged free and bolted past me into the house. The middle one followed, slow, like a stray dog too tired to fight anymore. The eldest lingered. His jaw tight, his fists clenched. Then finally he stepped in. Inside, I set plates on the table. Bread. Leftover stew. It wasn't much, but you'd have thought it was a feast. They devoured every bite. Hands shaking, eyes wide, as though the food might disappear if they blinked too long. When they finished, the youngest curled up on my couch. The middle boy fell asleep sitting upright, spoon still in hand. And the eldest, he just stared at me, not with trust. Not with gratitude, but with suspicion. "Why?" he asked. One word, heavy as stone. I didn't have an answer. So I told him the truth. Because I once had a son. And tonight when your brother said his name, I couldn't walk away. Pause, voice cracks low. The boy looked at me, his eyes unreadable. Then he whispered, "Then maybe you're not like the others." The others, that word, it stuck in my head like a thorn. I didn't know who he meant, but I would soon. and when I did, I'd wish I hadn't. It was the next morning. I'd barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. 3 boys under my roof, 3 strangers. And yet, they felt less like strangers than anyone I'd met in years. I was brewing coffee when it came. A knock. Firm, official, the kind of knock that doesn't ask, it demands. I opened the door. There she stood. A woman in her 30s, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp but tired. Her name was Clara, a social worker. "Mr. Connolly?" she asked. Her voice was clipped, practiced, like she'd said the same thing 100 times before. "We've had reports. Children seen entering your home last night." My heart sank. Reports. Someone had been watching. I stepped aside, letting her in. The boys froze. The eldest pulled the younger 2 close, glaring at her like she was the enemy. Clara knelt down, softening her voice. "Hi there. My name's Clara. I'm here to make sure you're safe." The boys didn't answer. The youngest hid behind my leg. The middle one stared at the floor. And the eldest? He spat out a single word. "Liar." The room went still. Clara's face didn't flinch, but her eyes, they gave her away. She'd heard that before, too many times. Low voice, slow, and that was the first time I realized. These boys weren't just orphans. They were survivors. Survivors of something darker. Clara sat at my table, papers spread out like maps of a broken world. She asked questions. Where did I find them? Who put them there? Did I understand the seriousness of keeping them? I told her the truth, every word of it. But truth, child, don't always set you free. Sometimes it just paints a target on your back. Clara sighed. These boys have records, but they're incomplete. She tapped the paper. Files opened, then closed. No follow-up, no clear guardians. The eldest boy, he finally spoke. They're not files, they're graves. Clara froze. I looked at him, stunned. What do you mean, son? He wouldn't answer. But his eyes, they told me more than words ever could. Eyes that had seen too many doors closed, too many promises broken. Later that night, when Clara had gone, I sat with the eldest boy. Tell me what you meant. He shook his head. You don't want to know. But I pressed him. And finally, in a whisper, he said, they sell us. Like cattle, move us around, new names, new homes. Then, silence. Narrator's voice drops, gravelly, that word silence. It chilled me, because silence means someone wants the world to forget. And I knew I couldn't forget. Pause. What I didn't know was that by keeping those boys, I just declared war on men who'd kill to keep their silence. That night I couldn't sleep. The boys lay scattered across my living room, the youngest curled on the couch, the middle one on the floor, and the eldest sitting upright by the window, as if standing guard. I watched him. The way his eyes scanned the street, the way his jaw stayed tight even in silence. He wasn't just a child. He was a soldier, not because he wanted to be, but because the world had forced him. I must have drifted off, because sometime past midnight, I woke to a sound outside. A car engine, idling, not moving, just watching. I crept to the window, headlights off, a black sedan. 2 figures inside, smoking, unmoving. The eldest boy whispered, they're here. My blood ran cold. Who? I asked. His voice was barely a breath. The ones who lost us. Pause, voice drops low. And that was the moment I realized these boys weren't abandoned. They'd escaped, and someone was coming to take them back. The next morning, Clara returned. This time, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. She closed the door behind her, sat down, and leaned forward. Jake, she said, her voice low, urgent. You need to understand. These boys aren't just runaways. They're part of something bigger, something ugly. I didn't flinch, Trafficking. Her eyes flickered surprised, then resigned. Yes, the youngest boy. Clung to my arm, like even hearing the word made him shrink. The middle one froze, and the eldest. He stared at Clara with a hatred so sharp, it cut the air between them. "They'll come for us," he muttered. "They always do," Clara shook her head. "They can't, not if we move quickly. If I file the right paperwork, if we get protective custody," the eldest interrupted. "No, paperwork won't stop them." He looked at me, his voice steadier than any child's should be. "Only you will." Narrator's voice slows, gravelly, deliberate. I'd fought enemies in deserts, jungles, and alleys across the world. But nothing chilled me like that boy's trust. He believed I could protect them, even when I wasn't sure I could protect myself. Clara sighed, rubbing her temples. "Jake, if you keep them, you're putting a target on your back. These people, they're organized, connected, ruthless." I leaned back, my voice flat. "Then they'll learn what happens when you put your hands on a soldier's family." Pause. And that, child, was the moment the war came home. I spent the afternoon pretending life was ordinary. Laundry in the machine. Stew simmering low. 3 boys learning the difference between forks and safety. Between a couch and a battlefield. But evening comes the way winter comes, quiet, certain, uncaring. I checked the locks twice. Moved the chair beneath the back doorknob. Hung a set of keys on a nail where only I could reach. An old habit from old lives. The eldest watched me work. Like a junior sergeant shadowing his CO. "Expecting someone?" he asked. "Always," I said. When the sky turned the color of bruised plums, I killed the living room lights and left one lamp on in the kitchen. You learn to make silhouettes your friend. You learn the difference between what's bait and what's you. Sometime after 9, the engine came back. Same low idle. Same black sedan. I stood in the hall and felt the boys gather behind me, the youngest clutching a fistful of my shirt, the middle boy frozen, the eldest steady as stone. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door softly behind me. Night air bit my lungs. The sedan's headlights stayed dark. 2 faces glowed faint in the dashlight, men who looked like they belonged to no one and nothing. I walked to the edge of my steps and let the boards creak for their benefit. "Evening," I said. No answer. Just smoke curling out a window and the kind of silence that tries to make you blink first. "You're on camera," I lied. "Front and back, cloud backup, police on speed dial." The driver smiled like a man who'd eaten too much salt. "Nice house," he said. "Shame about the company." "I like my company," I said. "That'll be your problem," he replied. The passenger opened his door and stood. He set a white envelope on my walkway with 2 fingers, like it might explode. "Consider this." A receipt. They eased backward down the street without headlights, ghosts pretending to be sensible men. When they turned the corner, the engine faded, and the crickets remembered their song. I didn't pick up the envelope right away. You learn to listen first. Then I bent, slid it open with my thumbnail, and read the single line inside. "You bought our property. Some words are colder than winter." Those were ice in my hands. I stepped back into the house. The eldest searched my face for the answer I didn't have. The middle boy wouldn't meet my eyes. The youngest pressed, his head against my hip like he was trying to listen to my bones. "Upstairs," I said softly. "We sleep together tonight." I dragged a dresser against the bedroom door and set a chair beneath the knob. Old tricks never retire. They just wait for you to need them again. Near midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, breath held still. A man's voice. Oiled. Patient. "Mr. Connolly, you're playing house with lost merchandise. Put them out on the porch at dawn. We only need the smallest. The other 2 can be resold." I didn't speak. My silence made him smile through the line. You can hear that kind of smile. Dawn soldier, don't make us come inside. The call clicked dead. I looked at the smallest curled on my blanket, thumb near his mouth, breath like a field mouse. And I thought about deserts and orders and the kind of men who confuse fear with obedience. Dawn would come, but I would be waiting. Beat, tell me, child, what would you do if a man called a child merchandise and asked you to hand him over? I called Clara before sunrise. Her voice was rough with sleep and worry. Don't open the door to anyone, Jake. I'm filing for emergency protective custody now. I'll bring a patrol if I have to. Paper first, I said. Then steal. She knew what I meant. On my way. At 8:47, there came another knock. Not the law's knock. Too polite. Too rehearsed. I checked the peephole. 2 men in collared shirts with badges on lanyards that looked fresh from a printer. The top one smiled for the door like he was posing for a brochure. Morning, sir. County Child Protective Services. We have an emergency pickup order. Slide it under, I said. He obliged. The paper already smelled like a lie. Wrong seal. Wrong judge's signature. Wrong everything that matters when a child's life hangs from it. Nice stationery. I said, tell your graphic designer the county doesn't kern that way. His smile thinned. Sir, we don't want to escalate. Then don't. He glanced past me like he could see through wood. You know you can't keep them. Watch me. The bottom man shifted his weight, and the hall rug spoke a whisper of rubber and impatience. He reached toward his waistband and found nothing he wanted in front of a locked door. I dialed Clara on speaker. Say hello to the county, I said. Who am I speaking to? Clara asked, voice brisk now, awake and armed with law. State your names and department. Silence. You could hear the lanyards being reconsidered. Sir, the top one tried again. If we have to force. The youngest stirred behind me at that word, force, a word that had been furniture in his life. I lowered my voice to gravel. You try that door, and I stopped being polite. The hallway went still, then footsteps retreated. Then the outer door closed. Then tires rolled away like bad ideas. Clara arrived 10 minutes later with a real badge and eyes that had seen this dance too many times. She held up the legitimate petition black. Ink, hard edges, a judge's name that meant something. Emergency protective custody for 72 hours while we sort placement, she said. Keeping them here with you, under my supervision, is the safest option right now. But Jake, you're in it now. They know you won't fold. I've spent my life learning how not to, I said. We sat at my table, the boys, Clara, and me, like a family made from spare parts. I poured coffee I hadn't earned and juice they didn't ask for. Who called? Clara asked. Didn't say, I answered. But he wants the smallest. The eldest's jaw hardened. He always did. Clara looked at him. Who? The boy hesitated, then pushed up his sleeve. Thin wrist. Pale map of old bruises. He traced a shape on the table with one finger, a bird, ugly and exact. A raven, he said, on his neck. Black ink, the beak points left. When he laughs, it moves. Clara's eyes flickered with the light of a puzzle finding its missing piece. I've heard of him, she whispered. They call him Wren. He runs intake for the pipeline. If he's interested in the youngest, there's a reason. I looked at the smallest, still small enough to fit between fear and my ribs. What reason? I asked. The eldest met my eyes without blinking. Because the youngest remembers things he shouldn't. Clara leaned forward. What things? The middle boy finally spoke, his voice paper-cut thin. Where the others? Went. The house forgot how to breathe. Clara's pen hovered over air. Even the clock on the wall decided ticking was impolite. I spoke first. Say it plain, son. The middle boy swallowed. There's a place. Not far. We were there. Last Ren kept us in a room with blue walls and a red door. And there was a smell like oranges and bleach. Clara's pen found paper and wrote a single word: warehouse. The eldest shook his head. Not a warehouse. A church basement. They changed the sign on Sundays. Clara looked at me. We can't go alone, she said. We don't go at all, I answered. Not yet. Then what? She asked. I turned the boys' plate so the chips faced the wall, a useless gesture that felt like kindness. We make this house a fortress. We gather names. We make the law look where it's been trained not to look, and when we move like a storm that remembers every dry field. The youngest tugged my sleeve. When? He whispered. When the raven lands, I said. Long beat, and child, the next night he did. A shadow on my porch, a knuckle on my door, and a voice like a smile sharpened to a knife. Evening, soldier. Heard you've got something of mine. The night was thick as tar. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Then came the knock, slow, deliberate, like someone testing the heartbeats inside. I opened the door just enough to see him, tall, wiry, a coat too thin for the cold, and on his neck, a raven, black ink. The beak pointed left, just as the eldest had said. Evening, soldier, he drawled. His smile was a razor laid sideways. Word is you've got something of mine. I stepped onto the porch. Closed. The door behind me. That old habit, never let the enemy see what you're guarding. Funny, I said. Thought children didn't belong to anyone. He chuckled, the raven's beak twitching with his throat. Everything belongs to someone, especially them. And you made a purchase outside the chain of command. That's theft. I stood silent, hands at my sides. Every instinct screamed to strike first, but war teaches patience. Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. He leaned closer, breath sour with smoke. You can't keep him, Connolly, not the little one. He knows things he ain't supposed to know. I felt the weight of his words like cold iron, and I whispered back, then maybe the world needs to hear them. For the first time, his smile cracked. His eyes hardened, flat as old pennies. He straightened, dusted his coat, and said, You've just painted a target on your door. Sleep light, soldier. He walked into the dark. No car, no sound. Just gone, like a shadow that never needed footsteps. Gravelly whisper, and child. I knew then, this wasn't just about saving 3 boys. This was about dragging truth out of the grave. 2 nights later, it came. Not a knock this time. A rattle at the back window, then another at the door. Small sounds, quick hands testing locks. The boys froze, eyes wide. The youngest whimpered low. I pressed a finger to my lips, moved silent through the dark. I had an old service pistol, locked away for years. That night, it found its way back into my hand. Cold metal, heavy promise. The back latch jiggled once more, then gave. A man slipped. Inside, lean frame, gloves, eyes scanning for small bodies. I pressed the barrel against his temple before he could whisper. Wrong house, I growled. He stiffened, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Because he knew soldiers don't bluff. From outside, another hissed. Get him out, quick. I dragged the intruder into the kitchen, flicked on the light. The boys sat huddled on the stairs, the eldest shielding the other 2 with his arms. The man spat at the floor. You don't know who you're crossing. I leaned close, my voice. Gravel, say his name, the one with the raven. His jaw clenched, no words, so I pressed harder. You think silence will save you? Finally he whispered. Ren. The eldest boy's face went pale, then stone. He whispered back, told. You. I marched the intruder to the porch, shoved him into the night. 2 shadows melted into the dark with him, running like dogs without leashes. I locked the door, turned back to the boys. Their eyes on me, wide and waiting. And I said the only thing that felt true: they won't stop. Not until we stop them. Narrator's voice lowers, filled with grit. That was the night I realized this fight wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about war. And in war, you don't wait for the enemy to knock. You carry the fight to their door. Morning light came late that day. Not because the sun forgot to rise, but because fear makes every dawn feel unfinished. Clara showed up with a briefcase stuffed thick as a coffin lid. She dropped it on my table and snapped it open. Inside, files, photos, reports, all of it stamped inconclusive or case closed. "These boys aren't the first," she said. Her voice was steel wrapped in exhaustion. "They're just the first who survived long enough to run." She spread the papers out. Faces of children smiling in school portraits, staring hollow in mugshots, fading into grainy missing person flyers, dozens, maybe hundreds. The eldest boy leaned forward, eyes darting. "That one," he said, finger on a girl's photo. "We saw her once. At the red door." Clara's hand shook. "She vanished 3 years ago. Official report says foster care placement. No follow-up." The middle boy whispered, "Foster care is what they call it when they sell us to new houses." Narrator's voice lowers, tightens. I felt something rise in me then. Not just anger, something deeper, the old soldier's fury. The kind that doesn't shout, it just waits, and when it moves, it doesn't stop. I looked at Clara. "Who's protecting them?" She shook her head. "Judges, police, even church elders. The network runs deeper than I can prove." I set my hand flat on the table, felt the wood strain beneath my palm. "Then we make proof. And we burn their house down with it." The eldest boy's eyes met mine. For the first time, he didn't look like a survivor. He looked like a soldier. With orders, and his orders were clear: fight back. The youngest hadn't spoken much since the night of the break-in. But that evening, he tugged at my sleeve. "Blue walls," he whispered, "red door." His eyes were far away, drifting somewhere darker than the room we sat in. He pointed at Clara's stack of papers, smelled like oranges. "And singing." Clara froze. Oranges, bleach, and singing. She scribbled notes fast. "I've heard of this. They hide in plain sight. Some of the safe houses are fronts. Shelters, churches, clinics." The middle boy muttered, "They prayed over us before they hurt us." Silence dropped like lead. Even the air refused to move. Clara closed her folder, her jaw hard. "I'll run a search. Churches with blue interiors. Recently repainted. Tied to orphan transfers. We'll find the red door." But I shook my head. "No, they'll see you coming. These men know paperwork like wolves know blood. If we go through channels, the channels dry up." She looked at me, frustrated. "Then what's your plan, Jake? You can't just storm in there with a pistol and a grudge." Narrator voice deepens, slow and deliberate. "Watch me." The eldest boy leaned forward. "If you go, we go." I stared at him, at the fire trying to grow in his thin chest. "No, you stay here." But he shook his head defiant. "We know what you don't. We know the doors, the guards." The way the singing sounds before it stops. Clara placed her hand on the table. "Jake, if the kids can describe locations, dates, faces, this is bigger than a raid. This is evidence. The kind that forces the law to act, even when it doesn't want to." I breathed deep, felt the weight of it pressing my ribs. A soldier fights wars, but a father fights for tomorrow. And for the first time since Caleb's death, I felt tomorrow standing in my house. 3 small tomorrows with bruised hands and broken pasts. Pause, and I swore to protect them, even if it meant burning down the whole world to do it. The night after the Red Door revelation, Clara came back with maps, county layouts, church registries, zoning permits. She spread them across my kitchen table like a general planning a war. The boys leaned in close, pointing, whispering. One map meant nothing to me, but to them, it was memory painted on paper. That corner, the eldest said, tracing a finger. Along an intersection near the river, blue walls. I remember the echo when they slammed the door. The youngest whispered, smelled like oranges there. Clara circled it in red ink. Her eyes narrowed. St. Margaret's, shut down years ago, but the records show deliveries. Supplies ordered monthly. Empty buildings don't order bleach and fruit, I said. She nodded. They're using it as cover. But if we storm it, Jake, we lose everything. We need evidence, witnesses, something they can't sweep under a rug. I shook my head. You don't catch wolves with paperwork. You bait them. You make them think the herd is exposed. Her eyes widened. You mean the boys? I shook my head slow. No, me. They want the youngest. Let them come looking. But we choose the ground. We control the light. We make their hunger work against them. The eldest boy studied me, expression. Unreadable. Finally he nodded, then teaches how to fight. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just their protector anymore. I was their commander. 2 days later it came. A note slipped under the porch mat. Handwritten in block letters, each word pressed into the paper like a wound. Midnight, St. Margaret's, come alone. Bring the youngest, or we burn your house down with all of you in it. Clara's hands shook when she read it. There. Tightening the noose, Jake. If you go. I'm already in the noose, I said. The question is who pulls the rope. The eldest boy stood. We go too. No, he glared. You can't fight shadows alone. We've lived in them. We know how they move. The youngest clutched my sleeve, eyes wide with fear. No. Red door, he whispered. Please. I knelt, held his small hand in mine. You won't walk through it again, son. Not while I'm breathing. Clara leaned against the wall, her voice breaking between fury and fear. Jake, if this goes wrong, they'll kill you. They'll take the boys. And I'll be left with nothing but paperwork and funerals. I looked her dead in the eye. Then it won't go wrong. Narrator lowers his voice, slow, measured. I've walked into ambushes before. I've heard men make promises with knives behind their backs, but nothing chilled me more than Wren's invitation. Because a man doesn't risk exposing his nest, unless he's sure you won't leave alive. Beat, voice cracked slightly, and yet, I went anyway. Because sometimes, child, a soldier doesn't choose his wars. The wars choose him. Midnight has a way of sharpening silence. Every sound feels louder. Every shadow feels alive. I left the house with the pistol tucked close, a flashlight, and nothing else but the weight of 3 boys' eyes on my back. The eldest whispered as I stepped out, Don't let them see fear. St. Margaret stood like a corpse on the edge of town. Boarded windows, paint peeling, but the red door, freshly painted, shining like a wound in the moonlight. I approached slow, boots crunching gravel. Each step heavy, deliberate. The kind of steps a man takes when he knows he may not walk back. The door opened before I touched it. And there he was, Wren, the raven twisting on his neck, beak pointing left. Behind him 2 men in suits too cheap to be anything but muscle. Soldier, he smiled. You came. I don't run, I said. He chuckled low, shaking his head. Good, then maybe we can settle this like businessmen. You hand over. The boy, we hand you cash. Enough to buy yourself peace until the grave. I stepped closer, every nerve screaming. I buried my peace with my son. The raven twitched as his smile vanished. He nodded to the men. And the red door closed behind me. Inside, the walls were blue, just as the boys said, and I smelled it. Oranges, bleach, and beneath it all, fear, the kind that lingers in bricks. Narrator voice drops, heavy. That was the moment I knew the boys weren't lying. This was the nest. This was where innocence had been broken. Wren walked me down a narrow hall, rooms on each side. Some doors open mattresses on the floor, cribs rusted with time. Some doors shut padlocks, chains, secrets sealed in wood. You see, Wren said, you can't save them all. The world doesn't want them. We repurpose them. His voice dripped smug, like a man convinced the world bends to his greed. I stopped walking, turned, raised the pistol, and aimed it at the raven. You call them merchandise, I said, but to me they're my sons, and no one touches my sons. His men drew fast, but soldiers learn faster. I fired once. The bullet slammed into the wall beside Wren's head. Splinters raining. The sound cracked through the hall like thunder, and in that crack I saw his smile falter. For the first time, the raven looked afraid. You won't shoot. Me, he hissed. You need me. Without me, the trail ends. The others vanish. You'll never find them all. I stepped closer, barrel steady. Then you'd better start talking. For the first time he did. Words spilling out like poison names, places, routes. The network wasn't small. It was everywhere. Churches, warehouses, even the very courts sworn to protect. But his arrogance betrayed him. He spoke like he couldn't be stopped. Like even confessing was just a game. So I pressed harder. Until sweat ran down his neck and the raven seemed to flap in fear. Narrator's voice slows, almost a growl. And child. That was the night the red door opened, not to take children in, but to let their secrets out. Asterisk, I walked out of St. Margaret's with more than a pistol and a pounding heart. I walked out with names, routes, a map of rot hiding beneath the skin of our town. Wren thought he was clever. He thought confessing would bind me to him. A soldier carrying his secrets instead of his chains, but secrets, child, are just weapons waiting for the right hand. And I had the right hand. Back at the house, Clara waited. Her eyes locked on me the second I stepped through the door. No words, just that sharp look that asked, "Are you alive?" I set the pistol down on the table, then spread the notes I'd scrawled in the margins of my memory. Churches, warehouses, judges' initials. Every place a child had been swallowed whole. Clara's hand shook as she read. This is enough to start a war in court. I nodded, but war in court doesn't mean victory. These people, they have friends with robes and gavels. If we go in with just words, the truth will be buried again. The eldest boy stepped forward. Then we tell it. All of it. Me, my brothers. We stand in front of everyone and say what happened. His voice didn't shake. It carried the weight of someone who'd already lived more life than any child should. I looked at him, proud and broken all at once. You're ready to fight, I said softly. But this fight, it's mine to lead. He held my stare. And in his silence, I saw it. The same fire my son Caleb once had. The fire that refuses to bow. Asterisk, the courthouse smelled of dust and polish. Men in suits whispered in corners, their eyes darting, their smiles thin. Clara moved beside me like a shield of paper in law. But I knew better. This wasn't a court. It was an arena. We sat in the gallery, the boys hidden behind protective glass, too young to stand, too scarred to testify without breaking. The judge entered. A man with hands too soft and eyes too tired. He glanced at the file Clara had placed before him, and for a moment, I saw it, the flicker. That hesitation. The look of a man weighing not justice, but risk. The prosecution stumbled through motions. The defense spoke smooth, their words polished with money and fear. Unsubstantiated claims, unreliable witnesses, fabricated evidence. And then Clara rose. Her voice didn't tremble. She laid out the notes, the names, the map. Of shadows, she didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just spoke truth like a hammer. But still, I could feel it. The walls closing. The judge wavering. The wolves circling in their suits. Narrator's voice drops low. Gravel thick, and I knew then, truth alone would not be enough. Not here. Not in a court that had fed from the same trough as the traffickers. It would take more. More than law. More than words. It would take a soldier's hand. And a father's fury. The courthouse was supposed to be a sanctuary. But I'd been in enough sanctuaries to know. Wolves prey there too. The judge leaned back in his chair, his robe draped like armor, his eyes flickering between Clara's evidence and the defense counsel's smirk. The defense stood tall, smooth as oil. Your Honor, these so-called testimonies are from children. Children clearly influenced by a grieving ex-soldier with a history of trauma. This entire case is an emotional fabrication. My fists clenched under the table. Clara placed a steadying hand on my arm, her eyes saying, "Not yet." Then the defense slid a folder across to the bench. Signed affidavits. Witness statements that Mr. Connolly has been coercive, unstable, dangerous. The judge reads slow, his lips tightening. He glanced at me over his glasses like a man measuring how much truth he could afford before dinner. Narrators. Voice thickens with gravel. That was when I saw it. The quiet exchange of nods. The smile too thin to be real. The deal already struck before the gavel even touched wood. This court wasn't built for justice. It was built to bury it. During recess. They moved us into a side chamber. The boys stayed behind glass with 2 deputies standing guard. Or so I thought. Clara leaned close, whispering, "Jake, the judge isn't with us. We need outside pressure. Press, feds, anyone who isn't tied to this county." Before I could answer, a scream cut through the hall. High, sharp, the kind of sound only a child makes when the past has come back. I ran. My boots pounded tile until I hit the chamber door. 2 men, badges clipped to cheap suits, had shoved the deputies aside. One had the youngest boy in his arms, the other yanking the eldest toward the exit. "Drop them," I roared. The pistol was already in my hand, drawn faster than memory. The man holding the youngest froze, his face pale under the fluorescent light. The eldest kicked and bit, refusing to be dragged like cattle. The middle boy silent, eyes blazing, smashed a chair into the man's legs. In seconds, the room was chaos. Shouts, scuffling, the sound of fear becoming fury. I pressed the barrel against the glass of the chamber door, my voice low, steady, deadly. "Put them down, or I end this right here." For a moment, time stopped. Then the door burst open from behind, Clara, with real marshals at her side. The imposters froze, caught in their lie. They dropped the boys, hands raised. The youngest scrambled back to me, burying his face against my chest. The eldest stood tall, trembling but unbroken. And the middle boy whispered one word like a prophecy. "Ren." Narrator voice lowers, almost breaking. Even behind bars, the raven's shadow reached us, and I knew. This war wouldn't end with gavel strikes. It would end only when the raven's wings were cut clean. The courthouse never felt smaller than it did that night. Police swarmed the halls, reporters sniffed at the edges, and still. The judge sat high in his chair, pretending nothing had cracked. Clara slammed her folder onto the bench. Her voice rang out like iron on stone. "Your Honor, 2 men impersonating federal officers tried to abduct my clients inside your own courthouse. If that doesn't demand a mistrial and federal intervention, then maybe this court is already bought and paid for." The judge shifted, sweat purling at his temple. The defense tried to object, but the sound died under the weight of a dozen eyes in the gallery. Mothers, fathers, families of other missing children who'd come to watch for the first time. The silence belonged to us. The eldest boy rose. He pressed his small hand against the glass of the chamber, and in a voice too steady for his years, he said, "They sell us. And he knows it." The courtroom froze. Gasps, murmurs. The judge's gavel struck, but the sound was hollow now, a hammer without nails. Narrator's voice slows, gravel deep. And that was the crack. Not the verdict, not the sentence, but the first crack in a wall built of silence. By evening, Clara had done what paper alone couldn't. She made calls, sent files. Names, dates, the Raven's confession scrawled in my hand. And by dawn, the courthouse parking lot was full of black SUVs, real agents. Not imposters with dollar store badges, men and women whose eyes burned not with greed, but with purpose. One of them, a tall woman with hair pulled tight, took my statement in a low, careful voice. "Mr. Connolly, we've been circling this network for years, but without first-hand testimony. We had no entry point, these boys. They've given us a door. And you kicked it open." I nodded. "Doors mean nothing if you don't walk through." She studied me for a long moment. "Walk with us then. But understand, when men like Ren start losing ground, they don't go quiet. They burn everything. On their way down." I looked at the boys, huddled together, 3 fragile tomorrows watching me with wide eyes. And I answered, "Then we put out the fire before it reaches them." Narrator pauses, voice low, deliberate. The war had left the shadows now. It wasn't mine alone anymore. The wolves had drawn blood in public, and the world had started to notice, but still. The Raven circled. And a soldier knows, the fight isn't over until the enemy's wings are broken for good. Asterisk, the feds worked quiet, like wolves who'd learned patience. Clara and I sat in a back room, watching through a black and white monitor as Ren walked into the trap. He thought it was a buy. Thought he was getting his merchandise back. Instead, the youngest boy sat safe miles away, and the room Ren entered was wired from floor to ceiling. He leaned against the table, Raven twitching on his neck, his smile that same sharpened blade. "Where's the kid?" he asked. The agent across from him said nothing, just slid a folder forward. Inside, his own handwriting. His own confession I'd dragged out of him at the red door. For the first time, the Raven faltered. His smile cracked. His hands twitched like a man searching for wings that weren't there. The room erupted. Agents stormed in, shouts, metal clashing metal. And Ren, the man who thought he owned children like cattle, was finally shackled like the beast he was. I watched through the screen, didn't cheer, didn't smile. Because war doesn't end with chains, it ends with silence. And I knew. More silence still waited in the shadows. Asterisk, weeks later, the trial came. This time, not in our county. This time, the judge's eyes weren't bought. This time, truth had teeth. Ren sat in chains, the Raven ink dark against his pale skin. The boys testified, their voices trembling but steady. Every word carved into the air like scripture. Clara laid the case bare. The feds backed her. And one by one, the wolves were dragged from their dens. When the gavel finally fell, it wasn't hollow anymore. It was heavy, final, a sound that buried. Shadows, the custody hearings followed. Papers signed, sealed, notarized. No longer orphans, no longer merchandise. 3 boys. 3 sons, and a soldier who never thought he'd be a father again. The eldest asked me one night, "Why'd you do it? Why'd you keep us when you could have walked away?" I told him the truth, because family isn't blood, it's choice. "And I chose you." Narrator's voice breaks, gravel soft, and child. "They chose me right back." Years have passed since that roadside night. The boys are grown now. Taller than me, louder than the ghosts that once chased them. The eldest joined the service. The middle one builds houses, real homes, not cages. And the youngest? He writes stories, poems, truths too heavy for most men. Truths he carries like fire. Sometimes I sit by the fire and think of Caleb, my first son, the one I lost. And I wonder if somehow he led me to those 3 boys. If his name on their lips was a message from beyond. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was fate. All I know is this: love never dies. It just finds new names, new faces, new arms to rest in. Narrator's voice slows, almost a whisper, so if you ever find yourself on a lonely road and you see someone lost, don't walk past. Because sometimes the family you save is the family that saves you. You sit by a fire long enough, child, and you start hearing things. Not in the crackle, not in the smoke, but in yourself. Every pop of wood sounds like a memory breaking loose. Every glow in the ash feels like the last ember of a life once. Live. And when I sit here now, years after it all ended, I see faces in the flames. I see Caleb, my first boy, the one whose laughter carried me through battlefields, the one whose sickness tore me open in ways bullets never could. Sometimes, I wonder if he was borrowed time from the start. If God lent him to me to teach me how to love, and then took him back to teach me how to grieve. But then, I see 3 other faces. 3 boys who stood by the roadside with a cardboard sign, their ribs showing, their eyes begging without words. 3 boys who should have been statistics, lost in files stamped case closed. Instead, they became my sons, not by blood, not by birthright, but by choice. Time has a way of dulling battles. Wars that once kept me awake are now just shadows flickering against the walls, but the war for those boys, that one never dulled, because it wasn't fought in deserts or jungles. It was fought in courtrooms, kitchens, back alleys, inside hearts that had forgotten how to trust. Do you know what it's like, child, to watch a boy who once flinched at every sound finally sleep through a thunderstorm? Or to see a child who once refused to speak stand in front of a judge and tell the truth that grown men feared? That's a different kind of victory. It doesn't come with medals. It doesn't come with flags. It comes with silence. The peaceful kind. The eldest, he was always the sentinel. Eyes sharp, back straight, like the world could only be trusted if he never blinked. He grew into that strength. Joined the service. When he was old enough, the Lord knows I tried to stop him. Why? I asked him once. After everything, why would you put on a uniform? He looked at me, steady as stone. Because you showed me what it means when a soldier fights the right war. I couldn't argue with that. So I saluted him, same as I would any man in my unit. And when he shipped out, I felt pride and fear. Braided into the same rope. The middle boy, quiet, thoughtful. He carried silence like it was stitched into his skin. But silence can be a gift too. He grew into a builder, not of cages. Not of rooms with red doors, but of homes, real homes. Wood, stone, windows wide enough to let in the sun, he told me. Once, every house I build for the kids who never had one. For us, for her, for him. And though he never said Caleb's name, I knew he built for him too. The youngest, he was the fragile one, the one Ren wanted most. The one whose memories cut deepest. He grew into words, became a writer. Stories, poems, truths that bleed slow but heal faster. He told me once, writing is how I keep the monsters on the page instead of in my head. And when he read his work aloud, I swear I heard echoes of Caleb's laugh in the rhythm of his voice. And me? I stayed right here, in the same old house with creaky steps and walls that remember everything. I tend the fire. I sit in Caleb's chair. And I listen, because being a father doesn't end when your children walk out the door. It doesn't end when they carry new names, new lives, new tomorrows. It stays, it lingers. It becomes the marrow in your bones. Sometimes, at night, I wonder if Caleb was the one who led me to that roadside. If he whispered his name through the lips of that smallest boy. If he pointed me toward the family I didn't know I was still meant to raise. Maybe it was chance, maybe it was fate. But I've lived long enough to know this. Love has strange ways of finding its way back. You can lose it, you can bury it. You can curse the sky for taking it from you. But love doesn't die, it waits. It circles back wearing a different face, a different voice, a different name. And if you're lucky, if you're willing to stop on a lonely road and listen, you'll recognize it. You'll reach out your hand, and you'll never let go again. Narrators. Voice slows to a whisper, fire crackling in the silence. So that's where my story ends, child. Not in the desert. Not in the courthouse. Not even at the red door dot. It ends here, by the fire. With ghosts I've learned to live with, and sons I never expected to raise. And if you take one thing from these words, let it be this. Family isn't what you're born into. Family is who you bleed for, who you choose, who you refuse to abandon when the world does. That's the truth I bought on a roadside one lonely night. 3 boys, 3 futures, 3 reasons to keep breathing. And when my own breath finally runs out, I'll go knowing one thing. I wasn't just a soldier. I was a father. And that's the only war I ever won that mattered.